phone call from Morocco. No threat, no interrogation, just a phone call to a crime journalist. On the other end of the line, a man who for years has been regarded as one of the key figures behind the bloodiest underworld war the Netherlands has ever known. He isn't calling to threaten anyone. He's calling to set something straight. I'm just in Morocco, nobody's looking for me. While in Amsterdam, one name after another from his circle ends up in a body bag, he sits calmly on the phone with a journalist, as if discussing the weather. This is the story of Houssine Ait Soussan, the man justice could never catch. While almost everyone around him ended up dead or serving a life sentence, to understand why this man came to play such a central role in what would later be called the Mocro War, we have to go back to Amsterdam's Underworld neighborhood, sometime in the early 2000s. There, in a district where the line between an ordinary kid and a rising criminal is razor thin, Houssine Ait Soussan meets the man who would change his life forever, Gwenette Martha, a name that quickly became synonymous with both power and fear in the Amsterdam underworld. Martha grew up with Surinamese roots and played as a child in Ajax's youth academy, where he reportedly had enough talent to one day break into the professional ranks. Things turned out differently. Instead of the first team, he chose the faster, more dangerous path of robbery and drug trafficking, growing into one of the city's heaviest criminals, with a network that eventually stretched into international cocaine lines. Ait Soussan becomes his confidant. Not his equal, not his rival, but his partner. Someone close enough to Martha to take over responsibilities whenever needed. Little is publicly documented about Houssine Ait Soussan's own earliest years. No exact birth date that keeps recurring in the files, no childhood anecdotes that journalists recorded the way they did for so many other names in this story. What does keep coming back is the neighborhood. Amsterdam's Underworld, a district with elegant facades on one side of the street and a brutal underworld economy on the other. It's in that world that Ait Soussan builds his reputation, not as a loud street kid trying to make an impression, but as someone who stays close to power without constantly stepping into the spotlight himself. That's exactly what makes him, when it really matters, hard to pin down. The circle around Martha had a high death toll early on. Friends and business partners from his younger years fell one by one. Clyde Lewis was shot dead in 2008. Benika Belserang followed in 2009. Clyde de Jesus came under fire in Amsterdam West in 2010, hit by dozens of rounds from automatic weapons. For anyone who grew up in this circle, violence wasn't the exception. It was a constant companion. Ait Soussan watched it all unfold up close, while he himself slowly took on a bigger role within the organization. That role becomes crucial when, in October 2009, Gwenette Martha is recognized and arrested in Belgium. He disappears behind the walls of the maximum security prison in Voet. For an organization that runs on the presence of one man at the top, that's a problem. Someone has to mind the business. And this is where the foundation is laid for what would later escalate. According to multiple sources, Houssine Ait Soussan gains steadily more power and responsibility within the organization during Martha's detention. But power you gain while the boss sits behind bars is power you'll eventually have to hand back. And not everyone is willing to do that. When Martha's release came into view, friction set in. Martha felt Ait Soussan had accumulated too much power during his absence. Trust between the two men broke down. Martha cut ties with his former partner and instead handed day-to-day leadership to his right-hand man Najib Boubou, a close friend he trusted blindly. For Ait Soussan, that was the moment to go his own way. He gathered his own group of young criminals around him. One of them was his brother-in-law, Mafia, who through this made his entrance into the cocaine trade, and who within a short time would be ordering large quantities himself. Two organizations that had once grown from the same root now stood opposite each other. And in the underworld, there's only one thing needed to blow apart a fault line like that: money that disappears. In early 2012, exactly that happens. A shipment of 200 kilos of cocaine surfaces in the port of Antwerp. Who the rightful owner was, and who made the shipment disappear, remains a matter of debate among crime journalists to this day. Some sources claim the shipment was intended for Ait Soussan's organization and was stolen by criminals close to Gwenette Martha. Other accounts of the conflict argue the exact opposite, that it was Mafia and his men who ordered the shipment themselves, lost it, and then shifted suspicion toward Martha's camp. Whatever exactly happened in that port, the outcome is clear. Two camps that had once trusted each other silently declared war on one another. And in that war, the first deaths came fast. On April 22, 2012, Ridouan Butaka, once a trusted figure and, according to some sources, even a kind of accountant within Martha's network, is shot dead in an Amsterdam shisha lounge on the Van Wouwstraat. Two men walk in. A shooter calmly walks down the stairs to the basement and fires several shots at close range. What at the time looked like the end of an individual story about a robber who'd become too well known in his own neighborhood suddenly turns out here to be part of something much bigger. Butaka's death, it turns out, doesn't stand on its own. In light of the conflict between Martha and Ait Soussan, some accounts of the Mocro War describe his killing as a direct act of revenge for the missing 200 kilos of cocaine, aimed at someone close enough to Martha's finances to serve as a target. The same event, seen from a different angle, suddenly takes on a completely new meaning. His death marks the formal beginning of a wave of killings that would plague the city for years to come. Barely half a year later, the violence strikes back the other way. On October 18, 2012, Najib Boubou, the man who had taken over Martha's day-to-day leadership, leaves the Crown Plaza Hotel in Antwerp. He's there at the invitation of Chris Bouwman, a member of Ait Soussan's group, to talk through the matter of the missing 200 kilos. A conversation, not a confrontation, was the intention. Around 2:30 in the afternoon, in front of several hotel guests frozen with shock, Boubou is shot dead by a hitman on the street outside the hotel. Chris Bouwman, who was there when it happened and may have helped set the trap, is arrested shortly afterward. In his cell, he hangs himself with a bedsheet. Justice doesn't rule out that he did so out of fear of Gwenette Martha's revenge, a man who had just lost his best friend. The hotel guests who happened to be standing outside at that moment watched a man get shot dead in broad daylight less than 10 meters from the entrance. A scene that had little in common with the calm business atmosphere the conversation about the missing cocaine was supposed to have. For Martha, the murder of Boubou is personal, according to crime reporter Paul Vugs, who followed the conflict for years for Het Parool and wrote the book Doorgeskoten about it. Martha sees the death of his right-hand man as a direct attack that must be avenged. And avenged it is. 2 months later, on a Saturday night Amsterdam would never forget. On December 29, 2012, around 10:30 in the evening, two cars drive into Amsterdam's Staatsliedenbuurt, an Audi RS4 and a Volkswagen Golf. The target is Benouf Edoui, Ait Soussan's brother-in-law and by now an increasingly prominent name in the conflict. From the moving Audi, gunfire opens up with a Kalashnikov, straight through their own windshield. Edoui narrowly escapes. Two other men who had come along for the meeting, 28-year-old Youssef Elkorf and 21-year-old Saeed El Yazidi, are not so lucky. They are chased down and riddled with bullets from moving cars. Elkorf is hit on the Van Bossestraat and later dies in the hospital. El Yazidi manages to reach the Range Rover they'd arrived in, but is shot again there and ultimately killed on the street around the corner. While fleeing, the attackers also fire on two motorcycle police officers, who just manage to drop off their bikes in time and take cover behind the vehicle. Bullets hit houses and a houseboat. One of the bullets is later found in a child's bedroom. The Court of Appeals will rule years later that the level of firepower used was unprecedented, and that it's a miracle more entirely random victims weren't killed in the middle of a densely populated residential neighborhood. For the residents of the Staatsliedenbuurt, that Saturday night wasn't some abstract underworld drama. It was real trauma. Families who had just sat down to dinner, or were putting their kids to bed, suddenly heard automatic gunfire echoing through their street. Bullets tearing through front doors and facades. A bullet landing in a child's bedroom where, thankfully, no child was awake at the time. Years later, in later reconstructions of that night, crime journalists still describe it as the moment the Amsterdam underworld lost its last shred of restraint. Previously, violence had largely stayed confined to criminals themselves, in isolated incidents, far from the eyes of ordinary citizens. After the Staatsliedenbuurt, that line was shifted for good. The double killing in the Staatsliedenbuurt is later identified by crime journalists as the moment the Netherlands got its first full view of a new generation of criminals. No longer the old-fashioned settling of scores between two men in an alley, but weapons of war in the middle of a residential neighborhood full of families. The two shooters, Anouar B. and Adil A., are both later sentenced to life in prison, partly because they also fired on the motorcycle officers. The court calls their actions cold and remorseless, and rules there is no longer any place for them in society. Years later, another investigation surfaces the name of Shahid Yaklaf, who according to prosecutors organized the double killing from behind the scenes. Yaklaf himself is later killed, removing yet another link who might have been able to reveal more about who exactly was behind the attack. That pattern, in which the men who know the most are systematically silenced, runs through the entire conflict. 10 years after that fateful Saturday night, crime journalists looked back on what had changed since. Their conclusion was bleak. The double killing in the Staatsliedenbuurt wasn't the end of something, but rather the beginning, the moment the Netherlands got its first full view of a type of criminal willing to drive through residential neighborhoods with weapons of war, indifferent to bystanders, officers, or children who happened to be caught in the line of fire. Everything that followed, from the murder of lawyer Dirk Wiersum to the Crown witness deal with Nabil B. to the Marengo trial against Ridouan Taghi, is viewed by those same journalists as a direct consequence of the escalation that began with those missing 200 kilos of cocaine in Antwerp. A conflict between two former partners, Gwenette Martha and Houssine Ait Soussan, that grew into something that would occupy the entire Dutch justice system for years. And Houssine Ait Soussan stands, according to almost every account of the conflict written since, on the other side of this fight. Not as an outsider, but as one of the two men the conflict revolves around. The war doesn't stop there. Manouf Edaoui, who survived the Staatsliedenbuurt killing, is himself sentenced in 2014 to 10 years in prison for the murder of Najib Boubou. 3 years later, in 2017, he attempts to escape prison in Roermond by helicopter. It fails. Gwenette Martha himself doesn't survive the conflict either. In 2014, he's betrayed by his own trusted associate Najib Himich, nicknamed Ziggy, who had by then switched to the competition and, together with his new partner Samir Biakrichin, nicknamed Scarface, plotted an attack on Martha. The first attempt fails. In an intercepted PGP message, encrypted phone messages the senders believed the police could never crack, Himich writes that the next attempt needs to be carried out by two men. That attempt succeeds. Gwenette Martha, once the most powerful name in this entire network, is killed. As if fate plays a cruel joke, Himich soon after betrays his own new partner Scarface as well. In the early morning of August 29, 2014, he's still sitting with his arm around the man's shoulder in a cafe in Marbella, Spain. The man who started the war with his revenge for Boubou ultimately becomes a victim of it himself, betrayed by the very same kind of loyalty that has been tearing the entire network apart for years. And amid all these deaths, arrests, and life sentences, one name keeps resurfacing in files and books, yet never appears before a judge: Houssine Ait Soussan. While his former allies and rivals were killing each other off, he himself had long since disappeared from the Netherlands. According to reports in the Dutch media, Ait Soussan went into hiding in Morocco and also spent time in Panama. There, according to several sources, he reportedly underwent cosmetic surgery to become less recognizable. On July 26, 2015, things finally go wrong. During a passport check in Marrakesh, Morocco, the then 34-year-old Ait Soussan is caught. He's traveling on a fake passport. Moroccan police subsequently search two properties linked to him and find, among other things, 34 watches, 10 passports, and thousands of euros in cash. Interpol is brought in, since Moroccan authorities link him to underworld killings abroad. The picture of those years underground is fragmentary but telling. A man who was once close to the top of an Amsterdam drug network suddenly lives under a different name, in a different country, with stacks of fake documents within reach in case he needs to disappear quickly. 10 passports point not to coincidence, but to a system, multiple identities, multiple routes, always an exit within reach. The watches and the cash tell another part of the story, that of a man who, despite living in hiding, was hardly struggling financially. While the body count and life sentences kept climbing in Amsterdam, Ait Soussan was apparently simply building a life beyond the reach of Dutch justice. At that point, Ait Soussan still has 244 days of prison time outstanding in the Netherlands for serious assaults he committed in Amsterdam in 2002 and 2008. But for his alleged role in the Mocro War, the string of killings in which his name keeps coming up as one of the two central figures, he is never formally charged. Prosecutors reportedly simply don't have enough evidence to pursue him for it. In Morocco, he's ultimately sentenced to just 4 months in prison for identity fraud over the fake passport. Within a few weeks, he's free again. That contrast is striking. In the books about the Mocro War, in television documentaries, and in Dutch crime media, Ait Soussan is consistently portrayed as Gwenette Martha's counterpart, as one of the architects of a conflict that cost dozens of lives. But in legal reality, his name appears on no conviction whatsoever. No conviction for a killing, no conviction for ordering a murder. Just that one, relatively light sentence for a fake passport. How is that possible? Criminologists and crime journalists who followed these networks for years point again and again to the same structural explanation. Organizations like these are extremely closed off. Almost nothing is communicated on paper. Money moves in cash or through shell structures, and anyone close enough to the top to actually testify is either a suspect themselves, dead, or too afraid to speak. As a result, prosecutors are almost entirely dependent on Crown witnesses for cases like this, criminals willing to talk in exchange for a reduced sentence. That same Crown witness system that ultimately brought down Ridwan Taghi is exactly the tool that, so far, has never been used forcefully enough against Ait Soussan. As long as no one in his inner circle is willing to testify about exactly what happened around that missing 200 kilos and the attacks that followed, his name stays suspended somewhere between rumor and proof, enough to be mentioned in every book about the Mocro War, not enough to ever have to stand before a Dutch judge. In 2019, something happens that few other main players in this story ever did. Houssine Ait Soussan himself, through an intermediary, makes phone contact with a Dutch crime journalist. The occasion is a report about a new book on the Mocro Mafia by authors Wouter Laumans and Maren Schrijver, in which his name comes up again, this time in connection with a kidnapping. According to the book, the person who ordered the kidnapping was said to be staying in Morocco, and that person was said to be none other than Houssine Ait Soussan. He wants to set something straight. According to him, it's not true that he's missing or on the run. "I'm just in Morocco, I do my work here, nobody's looking for me," he tells the journalist. It's the first time he himself, unprompted, picks up the phone to adjust his own reputation. That, in itself, is a strange moment in this story. Most of the men from this network are dead, or silent behind the walls of a maximum security prison. Ait Soussan simply calls a journalist to say the rumors about him are exaggerated. No denial of his criminal past, no defense against specific accusations regarding the killings. Just the message that he isn't in hiding, that he's simply living, working, and not being sought. At the time, there were even rumors circulating that he had vanished without a trace. And at one point, it was even briefly thought that he was one of 2 victims of a double killing at a pancake restaurant near Leiderdorp in 2009. Those turned out to be other men entirely. Ait Soussan was alive and wanted the world to know it. It's a remarkable form of self-awareness for someone in his position. Most criminals in hiding do everything they can to leave as few traces as possible, let alone call a journalist themselves to correct their own myth. But for Ait Soussan, reputation seems to be something he genuinely cares about, even if it's the reputation of a man who voluntarily stays in the shadows. He doesn't deny who he's been. He only denies that he's on the run. That distinction between admitting a past and denying a current status is exactly the kind of nuance that has allowed this man to slip away from easy judgment for years. Meanwhile, the broader Mocro War kept the Netherlands in its grip long after the direct conflict between the Martha and Ait Soussan camps had faded into the background. The term itself, Mocro Mafia, first appeared in Dutch media around 2010 as an umbrella term for criminal organizations made up mainly of men of Moroccan descent, active in the cocaine trade through the ports of Rotterdam, Antwerp, and Algeciras. The term has never been without controversy. Critics point out that the word Mocro, an informal and hardly flattering term for Moroccans, links an entire population group to organized crime, even though these networks in reality also included Antillean and Dutch members. But the term stuck in the media, in book titles, and eventually in a popular television series loosely inspired by figures like Gwenette Martha. In the years that followed, prosecutors increasingly relied on Crown witnesses to get a grip on the closed nature of these organizations. The most famous of them, Nabil B., turned himself into police in 2017 and struck a deal with the public prosecutor's office after feeling threatened and, by his own account, being weighed down by his conscience. His statements about the people who ordered the killings and the shooters themselves would eventually lead to one of the largest trials in Dutch history, the Marengo trial, in which Ridwan Taghi, among others, stood accused over a long string of killings and attempted killings. But the name Houssine Ait Soussan barely appears in that later chapter of the Mocro War. Unlike almost everyone around him, he appears to have kept himself out of the sight of law enforcement, year after year, while a new generation of criminals and a new generation of Crown witnesses took over the stage. And that's exactly where the core of why this story differs from most others in this conflict lies. Where Klaas Bruinsma died in front of the Hilton, where Sam Klepper was shot dead outside his own penthouse, where Gwenette Martha was betrayed by his own people, and where Ridwan Butaka was executed in a basement on the Van Wouwstraat, Houssine Ait Soussan still walks free today, named in every account of the Mocro War as one of the 2 central figures who let the conflict escalate, yet never convicted for the killings that haunt his name. Was he truly the architect behind one of the bloodiest conflicts in recent Dutch criminal history? Or has his reputation, like so many others in this world, grown larger than anything justice was ever actually able to prove against him? His own answer is simple. He's just doing his work. Nobody's looking for him, but in the files, the books, and the documentaries about the Mocro War, His name remains inseparably tied to a conflict that began with 200 kilos of missing cocaine and ended with dozens of deaths. The list of names that didn't survive this war remains impressive and tragic in equal measure. Redouane Boutaka, shot dead in a basement. Najib Boubou, killed outside a hotel in Antwerp. Youssef El Korf and Saeed El Yazidi, dead on a street where they happened to be with the wrong people. Chris Bauman, dead by his own hand in a cell. Shahid Yaklaf, himself killed once his name surfaced as the organizer. And finally Gwenette Martha himself, betrayed by the people he trusted most. Against that long list stands one name that keeps recurring in the story, but never on a criminal record for this case. Every name on that list once had their own story, their own childhood, people who mourned them. And every name in this story ends with a gravestone or a cell door. While almost everyone around him didn't survive this war, or is serving it out in prison, Houssine Ait Soussan lives on. Somewhere in Morocco, as he himself says, not wanted, not caught, and as far as justice is concerned, to this day, never conclusively proven guilty of what his own name has come to symbolize. Maybe that's the most uncomfortable conclusion of this entire story. Not that the underworld sometimes ends without justice, but that the man who, according to almost everyone, stood at the root of a war that wiped out an entire generation of criminals, simply kept on living to tell the tale. What do you think of this story? Leave your reaction in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching.